Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Supply Chain Matters podcast, hosted by Bob Ferrari. Supply Chain Matters has consistently been recognized as one of the top internet blogs in the field of supply chain management. Our goal in this podcast series is to provide the best insights and thought leadership from guests experienced and knowledgeable in supply chain management. Areas to be discussed include business processes, advanced technology, and various industry and individual business product demand and supply networks. And with that, here's your podcast host, Bob Ferrari.
And hello to all listening, and welcome to episode 2 of our Supply Chain Matters podcasting series. I am Bob Ferrari, the founder and executive editor of our blogging platform, and I will be serving as moderator of this podcasting series. For the listeners who are new to us, the Supply Chain Matters blog has been consistently rated as one of the top 10 blogs in supply chain management thought leadership. And since our founding in 2008, we have garnered a global-wide readership. This podcast medium serves as a supplement to the various published content on supply chain matters and is our opportunity to present a more two-way conversational discussion to important topics from other thought leaders. And my guest today, and I'm pleased to introduce him, is John Chorley. John is the Group Vice President of Product Strategy for Oracle Supply Chain Management Applications, and leads the team responsible for driving the business requirements and product roadmaps for these applications. John also serves as Oracle's Chief Sustainability Officer. In this role, he drives and coordinates all initiatives, both internally and externally, related to environmental sustainability in areas of IT infrastructure and business operations, as well as corporate reporting and risk management. Now, our listeners may or may not be aware that Oracle also has its own manufacturing and supply chain management capabilities related to the manufacturing of specifically engineered servers for its cloud-based applications. So, John has that unique perspective that he oversees sustainability for both a major IT systems provider and a manufacturer. John is a 20-year employee with Oracle, and our friendship dates back to my time as a budding supply chain industry analyst at the former AMR Research. I have commented on Oracle's various technologies supporting all aspects of supply chain management since that time, and have valued John's perspectives and observations relative to supply chain management. So welcome, John. It's a pleasure to have you as our podcasting guest.
Well, thank you so much, Bob. It's great to be with you here today. Certainly, it's a very unique time in our long involvement. I don't think we've seen quite anything quite like what we're seeing right now. It's certainly a time of challenge for folks running supply chains and looking forward to the future. So looking forward to our conversation about that and sharing such knowledge as we do have with your audience.
Thank you so much. And, leading up to this pandemic, as you know, supply chain teams were dealing with a lot of complexity, inefficiency, or needs for better data and more timely context-aware decision-making. And I guess from many perspectives, the virus has added new challenges and perhaps more urgent perspectives. So I think the first thing maybe we should touch upon is what major trends has Oracle been observing relative to the most significant challenges that Oracle customers are encountering right now in these areas? And how are they prioritizing these investments?
That's a great question. I think it's fair to say that the global COVID-19 pandemic, as a recent KPMG study said, has not really caused a breakdown of existing supply chain paradigms. It's really surfaced fault lines in those that were already in place for some time. Obviously has caused a tremendous demand shock, and it's caused equally a set of supply challenges. Those things, I think, have really highlighted some of the issues of perhaps a simplistic approach to globalization, what I call make in the East and sell in the West, single sourcing strategies, which I think are, have been challenged by the pandemic. A real focus on lowest cost at any price, which often creates brittleness in the supply chain, long supply chain lead times, lack of flexibility of sourcing options, as well as perhaps underlying the fact that lowest initial product cost is not always the main factor now anymore. It's really about being close to your customer, being able to respond to them, and aftermarket being almost as important as initial product sales. So all of those factors are in this kind of big stew of challenges that have been there for a while. And the pandemic, of course, has created short-term tactical issues, but also has shone a light on some of those fundamental shifts, changes, opportunities in how supply chains can be managed. So I think your other question was, how people are responding to that. Obviously, in the short term, there's a need to respond to very tactical issues. A number of customers who were sourcing out of Wuhan, for example. What's an alternate source of supply? One of our customers had to move some of that sourcing of power units, not a particularly complex product area, but happened to be one seriously impacted by the pandemic, and had to move their source to Italy, which had its own set of challenges.
Yeah.
And in response to that, I think they looked at that issue and realized, oh, my goodness, we had a tremendous variety of power units. Why do we have that variety? Why can't we standardize on that and thereby get a bit more resiliency in our supply chain? So, the initial tactical response turns into a looking at opportunities to simplify, to improve, to be more flexible. And I think we're going to see all of those things play through. So the realization of the challenge, the problem, translates into, well, how can we restructure? How can we do things better? How can we shift to a slightly different model in order to be more resilient next time some challenge hits our supply chain?
And I might add to that, John, from my perspective and my talks on this as well. We get down to that notion of never waste a crisis, in the sense that indeed this is significant disruption for many multi-industry supply chains, but there's opportunity here, and you just described one, and I've heard of others as well in that same vein, where let's look at these processes. Why do we have this variety of products? Do we need them? Do we need to pare them down? Why do we have all this layering that's going on right now in our decision making? Can we simplify that? Can we decentralize it? I think there's a lot of that going on right now.
I would absolutely agree with you. I think the three things that we've identified, if you like, large categories where people are looking at investment areas, is more automation. I mean, obviously, the companies that had a well-integrated set of business processes supported by automation that could be run virtually from the home, they were in a much better position to respond to these crises than other companies that relied on semi-manual or, sneakernet or kind of swing chair processes. So more automation. That also obviously applies to the actual production facilities. I think Bain are predicting a doubling in investment in automation technologies over the next 2 years. More resiliency. That obviously is a big topic. It leads into things like we just discussed, which is thinking about simplifying the components that go into your product line, eliminating unnecessary variability. It's about sourcing options. It's about the ability to move your logistics networks. It's also, of course, about visibility. You can't have resiliency without having visibility, not just to tier one, but to possibly tier two and three.
Yeah.
And then the flexibility angle, of course, and that is how can I change, the way I operate? How can I pivot to maybe a different product line, ramp up sales of that? How can I, look at different manufacturing options and distribution options? So all of those things, automation, resiliency, and flexibility are I think, the places where people are really focusing now.
Yeah, and just on that automation theme as well, I think this is an opportunity where technology like artificial intelligence and machine learning or Internet of Things can present, some effectiveness, don't you think?
I completely agree. And obviously those things as opportunities existed prior to the pandemic. I mean, we were seeing a lot of interest in machine learning being applied to various aspects of supply chain. And we have many of those capabilities built intrinsically into our products. But the pandemic clearly emphasizes the opportunity that those technologies can provide, again, by, helping to automate processes, helping to detect signals more quickly, helping to respond to those signals. And so I think, again, if supply chain has been possibly an area that has lagged in terms of technology adoption and in terms of maybe a shift to the cloud, let's say, this pandemic, as well as those underlying trends, is going to change that picture. I think it's going to definitely prioritize supply chain in terms of ongoing investment.
Yeah, exactly. And while we're on that cloud, a broader perspective here in that Oracle was the first enterprise technology provider, at least by my way of thinking, to offer a complete supply chain management applications software and technology suite that was specifically designed for the cloud, both in delivery and consumption. And, I'd be interested and curious that you could share with your readers in that notion, how have existing customers and also prospects embraced this technology deliverable model? I mean, what application areas have they typically adopted initially? And what application milestones have customers trended towards in their implementation timetables in this?
That's a fantastic question. Perhaps before answering it directly, I would just like to comment that many of our customers have told us that the fact that they're running the systems on our cloud has been an enormous positive during this time of the pandemic. We were able to deliver services to our customers with essentially no disruption. And if you consider that, the risk of how do you operate your own corporate data center and so on, all of those other challenges that you might have if you're not running on the cloud, we were able to eliminate those. And by the way, we're still seeing folks go live on our cloud solutions and doing so completely virtually without having folks in the office as you typically would have, which is really a tremendous story. There's one story, not a supply chain story, but even a major hospital in New York implemented the next phase of their project right in the middle of the hardest point of the pandemic. So kudos to them. But it's also, I think, an illustration of how cloud and cloud deployments do provide advantages along those lines we talked about, which is the automation, resiliency, and flexibility. But going back to your original question, which is how are people adopting these solutions? So, I think there's three major paths that people take. First is they may have a short-term area where they know they have a weakness, an opportunity, and that could be in planning, it could be in transportation, logistics, it could be in PLM, product master data management, it could be in sourcing. All of those areas, they can deploy a tactical solution to help address that business problem. The other major pattern is there may be an underserved division that is maybe running on some old technology, and they're looking to replace that, and they may go for a full deployment solution in that division. And the final option is burning platform. They've got to move. They've got to change. Business is changing underneath them, and they really go all the way into